The first time I realized my family could erase me without raising their voices was the night my younger brother's engagement was announced at Christmas dinner, and no one noticed that I had been sitting at the table for 3 hours without being spoken to. I'm Eleanor Brooks. I was 32 that winter. I had just driven 6 hours from Chicago back to my hometown in northern Pennsylvania, through freezing rain and empty highways, because my mother said, "It matters that you're here." She didn't say why. She rarely did anymore. The house looked the same as it always had. White siding, blue shutters, the wreath on the door that my mother replaced every December like clockwork. Inside, the smell of pine cleaner and roasted turkey hit me all at once. Familiar, almost comforting. Almost. My father, Thomas, was in his usual chair by the window, pretending to read the newspaper while actually watching the driveway. My mother, Linda, moved briskly between the kitchen and dining room, lips tight, hair perfect. My brother, Andrew, stood near the tree with his girlfriend, Melissa, one hand wrapped possessively around her waist. No one hugged me when I walked in. My mother smiled and said, "You found it okay?" Like I was a delivery driver. My father nodded without standing. Andrew lifted 2 fingers in a half wave and went back to whispering to Melissa. I told myself not to take it personally. I had been telling myself that for years. Dinner was formal. The good china, the crystal glasses, the seating arrangement that placed Andrew at the head beside my father, Melissa next to my mother, and me at the far end near the kitchen door. I could have left midway and no one would have noticed. Halfway through the meal, Andrew stood up and tapped his fork against his glass. My mother's face lit up in a way I hadn't seen directed at me since I was a child. "We have some exciting news," Andrew said, grinning. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Melissa gasped. My mother clasped her hands to her chest. My father stood. They cheered. They cried. They hugged. My mother rushed around the table to embrace Melissa like she had always belonged there, like she was something precious that needed to be protected. Someone poured champagne. Glasses clinked. No one looked at me. I watched it all from my chair, napkin folded neatly in my lap, hands steady. That was the part that surprised me. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't angry. I felt something colder than that. Something settled. Later that night, as dishes were cleared and conversations split into smaller, louder clusters, my mother finally turned to me. "Oh," she said, as if remembering. "Did you hear? Andrew's engaged." "I heard," I said. She smiled tightly. "We're thinking of a spring wedding. It'll be expensive, of course, but family is family." I nodded. "Congratulations to them." She hesitated, then added, "We may need to talk about some things after the holidays." "What things?" She waved a hand. "Logistics, expectations. You know how these events are." I did know. I've been to enough of them as the invisible one. That night, lying in my childhood bedroom, staring at the cracks in the ceiling I'd memorized as a teenager, I realized something else. My parents hadn't just favored Andrew. They had organized their entire lives around him. His needs, his milestones, his future. I was allowed to orbit at a safe distance, useful when convenient, quiet when not. At 2 a.m, my phone buzzed. A text from Andrew. "Big news tonight. Hope you're happy for us." I stared at the screen, then typed back, "Congratulations." 3 dots appeared, disappeared. Then another message. "We'll need you to be flexible this year. There's a lot going on." I didn't ask what he meant. I already knew. 2 weeks later, back in Chicago, I got the email that confirmed it. From Linda Brooks. Subject, Spring Plans, Eleanor. "With the wedding coming up, we've been reviewing finances and family responsibilities. Your father and I think it's best if you don't expect any inheritance from the house or the business. Everything will be going to Andrew. It's just simpler that way. You're independent. You understand." I read it. The house. The small manufacturing company my grandfather had built, that my father had taken over, that I had worked in every summer from age 14 through college. Inventory, bookkeeping, payroll, weekends lost. All of it gone. With 1 paragraph. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded the email to my personal folder and called my friend Marissa, a corporate attorney I'd met years earlier when we shared an office floor. "Can I ask you something hypothetical?" I said. She laughed. "Those are never hypothetical with you. What's going on?" I told her everything. The Christmas dinner, the engagement, the email. There was a pause on the line. "Do you have any documentation?" she asked. "I have years of it," I said. "Payroll stubs, emails, contracts I drafted but never signed." "Then this isn't about feelings," she said calmly. "It's about rights." That word landed harder than anything my family had said. Rights. I had spent so long trying to earn approval that I'd forgotten I was allowed to claim anything at all. "What do you want?" Marissa asked. I looked out my apartment window at the frozen street below. People rushing somewhere, choosing something. "I want to stop being erased," I said. "Then don't argue," she replied. "Prepare." That night, I opened a new folder on my laptop. I labeled it simply, Records. I didn't know yet how far this would go. I didn't know how ugly it would get, or how quiet the ugliest parts would be. They thought I would accept being excluded, because I always had. They were wrong. The first document I added to the Records folder was a scanned copy of my very first paycheck. It was dated June 2006. I was 17, still in high school, still believing that hard work would eventually translate into belonging. The check was from Brooks Industrial Supply, the family business, signed by my father. Amount? $380. Memo line: Summer Inventory Assistance. I stared at it longer than I needed to. Not because of the money, but because of what it represented. Proof that I hadn't imagined my role. Proof that I hadn't just helped out, as my mother liked to phrase it, when it suited her. Over the next few nights, I worked methodically. I pulled old emails from archived accounts, screenshots of spreadsheets I'd created, a draft operations manual I'd written during my senior year of college because Andrew's too busy with school, according to my father. Messages from suppliers thanking me for resolving issues. Even a holiday card from a vendor addressed directly to me. Not the family. Me. By the end of the week, the folder was heavy. I didn't tell anyone what I was doing. Not Andrew, not my parents, not even Marissa, beyond the basics. This wasn't about confrontation. It was about clarity. The next call came from my mother, on a Tuesday afternoon while I was leaving work. "I'm listening," I replied. "There's been some confusion," she continued. "Andrew mentioned you seemed upset about the email." "I wasn't confused," I said. I understood it. A pause. I could picture her lips pressing together. She hated when I didn't take the bait. "Well," she said, "this is a sensitive time. The wedding is going to be expensive, and your father and I need to think about the future of the business. It's just practical." "Practical for who?" "For the family," she snapped. I didn't raise my voice. "I am part of the family." Another pause. Longer this time. "You've always been so emotional," she said finally. "This isn't personal." That was when it clicked. It had never been personal to her. That was the problem. "I'm not emotional," I said. "I'm taking note." She scoffed. "You're reading too much into this." "Then it won't be an issue if I ask some questions," I replied. "Questions about what?" "About my role in the company. About compensation. About ownership." Her breath caught. Just barely. "Why would you do that?" she asked. "Because I worked there for 16 years, I said. And I never asked before." The call ended shortly after. Not with a resolution, but with my mother saying she had something on the stove. A lie. She hated cooking. 2 days later, Andrew showed up at my apartment, unannounced. He looked the same as always. Clean-cut, confident, slightly annoyed, like the world was failing to accommodate him quickly enough. "You blindsided mom," he said, standing in my doorway without sitting. I asked questions. I replied. "You're making this harder than it needs to be." I gestured to the chair. He didn't take it. "Dad built that company," he continued. "It's only fair it stays with me." "Our grandfather built it," I corrected. "Dad inherited it, just like you're about to." He frowned. "You don't even live there anymore." "I worked there longer than you did," I said quietly. That was different. "How?" He hesitated. That was new. "You were helping," he said finally. "I'm running it." "On paper," I replied. His jaw tightened. "What do you want, Ellie?" I hadn't heard that nickname in years. He only used it when he wanted something. "I want acknowledgement," I said. "And I want to understand why I was never given a choice." "You always had a choice," he said. No, I replied. I had expectations. He laughed, sharp and humorless. You're really going to do this now? Right before my wedding? I looked at him carefully. At the entitlement he wore like a tailored suit. At the way he assumed timing only mattered when it was his. Yes, I said. Now is exactly when I'm going to do this. His phone buzzed. He glanced at it and exhaled. Look, he said, lowering his voice. Mom and Dad are stressed. If you push, they'll dig in. You know that. I do, I said. That's why I'm not pushing. What are you doing then? I'm stepping back, I replied, and letting the facts speak. He stared at me like I'd spoken another language. You're threatening legal action, he said flatly. I'm documenting my work history, I corrected. There's a difference. He shook his head. You're going to regret this. Maybe, I said. But I already regret staying silent. After he left, I sat alone in my kitchen and let the quiet settle. My hands were steady again. That same cold clarity from Christmas dinner returned. That night, an email arrived from my father. From Thomas Brooks. Subject: Let's clear the air. Eleanor, your mother tells me you've been asking questions about the business. I don't like conflict, but I think we should talk this through like adults. Come home this weekend. Just us. No mention of Andrew. No mention of the email. No acknowledgement of my work. Just us. I forwarded it to Marissa. Her reply came within minutes. Do not go without representation. And Eleanor? There's a reason they want to talk now. I closed my laptop and leaned back in my chair. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of what they might say. I was curious about what they were hiding. I didn't go home that weekend. Instead, I drove to a storage unit on the south side of the city that I'd been paying for without thinking much about it. It held the remnants of my 20s. Old furniture, college boxes, things I hadn't needed but couldn't quite let go of. At the very back was a sealed banker's box labeled Brooks Personal. I hadn't opened it in years. Inside were notebooks, spiral-bound, cheap paper, my handwriting from different stages of my life. Summer logs from the factory, notes I'd taken when my father taught me how to negotiate with suppliers. Lists of mistakes I was told not to repeat out loud. Names, dates, conversations I'd written down because something in me knew they might matter one day. I sat on the concrete floor and flipped through them slowly. There it was, July 2011. The summer Andrew studied abroad and I ran operations with a skeleton crew. Dad said if anything goes wrong, it's on me. If it goes right, we won't talk about it. I didn't remember writing that, but I remembered living it. That afternoon, I called Marissa back. They want me to come home, I said. Just us. Of course they do, she replied. They want control of the environment. I'm not going. Good, she said. Then we move forward. Forward meant paperwork, formal requests, things I had never done with my family because we didn't do things that way. We did things through implication and silence and guilt. Marissa drafted a simple letter. Not aggressive, not threatening, just precise. A request for my employment records. A request for clarification on compensation. A request for documentation of ownership structure and succession plans. When she sent it to me for review, I stared at my name at the top. Eleanor Brooks, claimant. I signed it without hesitation. 3 days later, my father called. His voice sounded tired, older than I remembered. Why are you doing this? He asked. I'm asking for information, I said. You taught me to. That was different, he said softly. Everything was always different when it came to me. You could have just come home, he continued. We could have talked. Talked like we always do? I asked. Where I listen and nothing changes? Silence. I didn't know you felt this way, he said finally. That's not true, I replied. You just didn't want to know. He sighed. Your mother is very upset. I know. She thinks you're punishing us. I'm protecting myself. That word again. Protecting. It felt unfamiliar, but right. He cleared his throat. There's something you should understand. The business isn't as stable as you think. I leaned forward. What does that mean? Orders have been down. Debt is higher. We refinanced the property last year. I closed my eyes. You refinanced the house? I asked. Yes, he said. To cover some shortfalls. And Andrew knows this? Yes. And I was never told. No, he admitted. The picture sharpened. They weren't just excluding me from the future. They were insulating me from the risk, while expecting loyalty. They needed Andrew to look like the heir apparent, strong, stable, deserving, and they needed me quiet. That's why the inheritance email, I said. Another pause. It seemed simpler, he said. For who? I asked again. He didn't answer. 2 days later, I received an email from the company's accountant. Attached were partial records, incomplete, redacted in places that mattered. Marissa wasn't surprised. They're stalling, she said, which means they're afraid of something. What? I asked. Of you, knowing your leverage. That weekend, I went to a wedding dress fitting. Not mine, Melissa's. My mother had insisted weeks earlier that I be there. It'll mean a lot to Andrew, she'd said. I went because I wanted to see something. The boutique was bright and expensive. Melissa emerged from the fitting room glowing. My mother cried openly. Andrew squeezed her hand. No one asked my opinion. When Melissa turned to me and asked softly, "Do you like it?" I nodded. "It's beautiful," I said. And I meant it. Later, while the others were distracted, Melissa sat beside me. "You okay?" she asked. It was the first time anyone in that family had asked me that without an agenda. "I will be," I said. She hesitated. "Andrew says you're being difficult." I smiled faintly. "Andrew says a lot of things." Her brow furrowed. "He also said the business might not survive if there's a fight." "That's not on me," I replied. "That's on decisions made without transparency." She studied me. "I didn't know you worked there that long." "Most people don't," I said. Something shifted in her expression. Uncertainty, maybe doubt. That night, my mother sent a text. "You're embarrassing us." I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my laptop and sent Marissa another batch of documents. The notebooks, the logs, the emails. Her response came an hour later. "This is more than enough to establish contribution. But Eleanor, there's something else here. You may have a claim they don't expect." My stomach tightened. "What kind of claim?" I typed back. She called instead. "You helped draft operational processes that are still in use," she said. "You negotiated contracts. You may qualify as a de facto partner, not just an employee." "That's impossible," I said. "They never called me that." "They didn't have to," she replied. "The law cares about actions, not titles." I sat back, heart pounding. "For years," she continued, "they treated you like labor. But the paper trail says leadership." I thought of my mother's email. "You're independent. You understand." They had mistaken my silence for surrender. "When do we proceed?" I asked. "After the wedding," Marissa said. "Timing matters." I looked at the calendar on my wall. 6 weeks away. "Okay," I said. After we hung up, I stood in my apartment and felt something unfamiliar rise in my chest. Not anger, anticipation. Because for the first time, the imbalance was visible, measurable, correctable, and they had no idea what was coming next. The wedding invitation arrived 3 weeks later. Thick cardstock, embossed lettering, addressed to Eleanor Brooks with no +1. I held it for a long moment before setting it on the counter. It wasn't an oversight. My mother had always been meticulous about details. This was a message. You may attend. You may not belong. I RSVP'd, yes. Not because I wanted to celebrate, but because I wanted to observe. In the meantime, the request for documentation continued. Slowly. Reluctantly. Each email from the accountant arrived like a confession written in half-truths. Numbers without context. Summaries without backups. Enough to look cooperative. Not enough to be transparent. Marissa assembled everything into timelines and charts I never would have thought to create. Contribution mapped against revenue growth. Decision points matched to email threads. Every place where my name disappeared after the work was done. "They've been rewriting history," she said during one call, "but they didn't erase you cleanly." At work, I kept my head down. My life there was simple by comparison. Clear expectations, clear compensation, clear respect. The contrast was stark. One afternoon, my mother showed up at my apartment. She hadn't been invited. "I was in the neighborhood," she said, standing stiffly in my doorway. She took in the space like she was inventorying it. Clean. Modest. Entirely mine. "You look tired," I said. She bristled. "This has been hard on all of us." "I know," I replied. She sat, without being asked. "We don't understand why you're doing this," she said. After everything we've given you, I leaned against the counter. Can you tell me what that is, specifically? Her lips tightened. A home, education, opportunities. Those are parental responsibilities, I said calmly. Not debts. Her eyes flashed. You're being ungrateful. No, I said. I'm being accurate. She stood abruptly. Andrew needs stability right now. A wife. A future. You're threatening that. I'm asking for acknowledgement, I said. If that threatens him, that's not my fault. She shook her head, exasperated. You always had to complicate things. I looked at her then. Really looked. At the rigidity. The fear underneath it. You never let me choose, I said quietly. You just decided who I was allowed to be. She didn't deny it. When she left, she said only one thing. If you keep this up, you'll lose your family. The door closed behind her. I didn't chase her down the hall. The wedding day arrived, bright and humid. Early summer. The kind of day that looks perfect in photos. The venue was a restored barn outside town. White flowers, string lights, everything tasteful. Expensive. I sat alone during the ceremony, 3 rows back. Andrew never looked at me. My parents did once, briefly, then away. During the reception, I watched the patterns I'd always known play out in real time. My mother directing, my father avoiding. Andrew basking. Guests praising. Speeches rewriting childhoods. When my father stood to toast the couple, he said, "Family has always been the foundation of everything we've built." I wondered which family he meant. After dessert, Andrew approached me. "This ends after today," he said quietly. "What ends?" I asked. "This thing you're doing," he said. "Mom's barely holding it together." "I'm not doing anything to her," I replied. "I'm doing something for me." He leaned in. "If you go forward with this, you're not welcome anymore." I looked at him, at the certainty in his eyes, at the assumption that exclusion was still his to grant. "I know," I said. That surprised him. I left early. 2 days later, Marissa called. "They've made a move," she said. "What kind?" "They transferred assets," she replied. Quietly. Sloppily. "It looks like an attempt to shield the company before disclosure." My pulse steadied instead of racing. "Is that legal?" I asked. "Not if it's meant to avoid a valid claim," she said. "And especially not if it involves marital assets right after a wedding." I closed my eyes. "So what now?" I asked. "Now," she said, "you stop waiting." That afternoon, I authorized her to file. No public announcement. No dramatic confrontation. Just documents served properly. Quietly. That evening, my phone lit up. Andrew. My mother. My father. I didn't answer. I poured a glass of water and sat at my table, listening to the city outside my window. For the first time, the silence wasn't theirs. It was mine. The papers were served on a Thursday morning. Marissa had warned me not to be home. Not because of danger, but because proximity invites pressure. So I went to work as usual, sat through meetings, answered emails, pretended my life wasn't splitting cleanly down the middle. At 10:42 a.m., my phone vibrated. Unknown number. I didn't answer. At 10:44, a text arrived from my father. "Please call me." I waited until lunch. When I stepped outside, the air felt sharper than it should have for June. I walked 2 blocks before calling him back. "What did you do?" he asked. No greeting, no pause. "I formalized what I asked for weeks ago," I said. "You sued us," he said, voice cracking. "No," I corrected. I asserted a claim. "That's the same thing." "It's not," I said. "One is emotional, the other is legal." He exhaled heavily. "Your mother is hysterical." "I'm sure," I said. "She hasn't stopped crying." I closed my eyes. There it was, the old lever. "I'm not responsible for her reaction," I said. "You've turned this into a war," he said. "I didn't start it," I replied. "I documented it." Silence stretched between us, thick and uncomfortable. "There are things you don't understand," he said finally. "Then you should have explained them," I replied. Years ago. That afternoon, Marissa forwarded me something new. Internal emails between my father and the accountant that had been reluctantly disclosed. One line stood out. "We need to move fast before Eleanor realizes what she's entitled to." I read it twice. They hadn't underestimated my feelings. They had underestimated my knowledge. That night, Andrew called, then called again. then left a voicemail. "You've gone too far," his message said. "This will destroy Mom. Is that what you want?" I deleted it without responding. The next morning, a package arrived at my apartment. No return address. Inside was a photo album. Old, leather-bound. I recognized it immediately. My childhood. Birthdays, school plays, summer picnics. Proof that I had been there, that I had been included once. Tucked inside the cover was a note in my mother's handwriting. "Remember the good times. Don't burn everything down." I closed the album and set it aside. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a plea for me to return to my role. I didn't. By the following week, the tone shifted. Marissa called me into her office. She had that look she only got when things stopped being theoretical. "They're offering a settlement," she said. "That fast?" "They're nervous," she replied. "And there's more." She slid a document across the desk. "An appraisal. The house, the factory, the land. Numbers higher than I expected. They've been using company funds to support personal expenses," she continued. "Your brother's wedding included." I felt something tighten behind my ribs. "So they used the business to pay for the celebration that excluded me," I said. "Yes," she replied. "And that matters." "What do they want?" I asked. "To buy you out, quietly," she said. "A lump sum, non-disclosure, no admission of wrongdoing." "And the company?" I asked. "They keep it," she said. "For now." I leaned back. "No," I said. Marissa didn't argue. She just nodded. "Then we escalate," she said. That evening, my mother showed up again. This time, she was shaking. "You've humiliated us," she said the moment I opened the door. "I didn't tell anyone," I replied. "You didn't have to," she snapped. "People talk. Andrew's in-laws are asking questions." I stepped aside and let her in. Not out of courtesy, out of curiosity. She sat at my table, hands clenched. "Why are you doing this to your own family?" she asked. I sat across from her. "You taught me something without realizing it," I said. She frowned. "You taught me that love in this family is conditional," I continued, "and that the only way to survive is to accept terms without question." Her eyes filled. "That's not true." "It is," I said. And I finally stopped agreeing to it. She looked at me like she didn't recognize me. "You're cold," she whispered. "No," I said. "I'm clear." She stood slowly. "If you go through with this, don't expect forgiveness." I met her gaze. "I'm not asking for it." After she left, I opened the photo album again. I studied the pictures more closely this time. In every group shot, Andrew was centered. I was always slightly off to the side. That weekend, Marissa filed an amended claim. Expanded scope. Expanded discovery. They would have to open their books completely. There would be no more hiding behind silence. On Sunday night, I received a single text from Andrew. "You've changed," I typed. Number 1. I stopped pretending. Then, I turned off my phone. Because the next phase wasn't about reaction. It was a discovery changed everything. What had been a family conflict on paper became a matter of records, timelines, sworn statements. The emotional fog lifted, replaced by fluorescent light and numbered exhibits. I hadn't expected how grounding that would feel. Marissa warned me it would get uncomfortable. "They'll say things about you," she said. "Not to your face, in writing, under oath." "I can handle that," I replied. I meant it. The first deposition was my father's. I didn't attend in person. I listened later to the audio recording in Marissa's office, a yellow legal pad in front of me, my pen still. When asked about my role at the company, he hesitated. "Eleanor helped out," he said. "How?" the opposing counsel pressed. "With administrative tasks." "Did she negotiate supplier contracts?" Long pause. "Yes." "Did she manage payroll during your absence in 2011? "Yes." "Did she draft operational procedures currently in use?" Another pause. Longer this time. "Yes." The silence after that answer was heavy. Not because of what he said, but because of what he had spent years not saying. Then came my mother's deposition. That one I didn't listen to right away. Marissa summarized it for me first. "She minimized," she said. "Deflected. Claimed you volunteered." "Volunteered," I repeated. "Yes," Marissa said. But she contradicted herself. Several times. When I finally listened, I heard it clearly. My mother's voice tightening whenever the questions became specific. Her insistence that everything had been done as a family, until pressed on compensation, authority, decision-making. At one point she said, Eleanor never complained. That line stayed with me because it was true. And because they had built an entire system around that fact. Andrew's deposition was last. He sounded confident at first, almost dismissive. She was around, he said, but she didn't have leadership responsibilities. Did you receive a salary when you first joined the company? The attorney asked. Yes. Did Eleanor? I don't know. You were living in the same house at the time. I didn't pay attention to that. The recording crackled with discomfort. And when the company refinanced its debt, the attorney continued, were you aware of Eleanor's contributions being excluded from valuation? I trusted my parents to handle it, Andrew said. There it was. Trust. They had trusted the structure, trusted the silence, trusted that I wouldn't disrupt it. 2 weeks later, I was deposed. I wore a navy suit I'd bought myself years ago for a promotion my family never acknowledged. I answered calmly, precisely. I didn't embellish. I didn't editorialize. I described my work, my hours, my responsibilities. When asked why I hadn't demanded compensation or title earlier, I said the truth, because I was conditioned to believe that asking would cost me access to my family. No one interrupted me. Afterward, Marissa nodded once. That landed, she said. Outside the legal process, the consequences rippled quietly. Andrew's in-laws postponed a joint business venture with the company. No explanation given, just distance. A longtime supplier requested revised terms, more oversight, more guarantees. My father emailed me late one night. We should have done better by you. I read it once. I didn't respond. Not because I wanted to punish him, because I needed his accountability to exist without my validation. A month later, mediation was scheduled. Neutral room, neutral mediator. No raised voices allowed. My parents sat together on one side of the table, Andrew beside them. Melissa was there too, silent, hands folded. I sat across with Marissa. The mediator opened with procedure, options, risks. Then my mother spoke. We never meant to hurt Eleanor, she said, voice trembling just enough to sound sincere. We thought we were doing what was best for everyone. Marissa leaned forward slightly. What was best for whom? She asked. No one answered. The first offer was higher than the last. Still not enough. Still conditional. I shook my head. I'm not here for a payout, I said. I'm here for recognition and separation. Andrew scoffed. You want us to say sorry? No, I replied. I want my name removed from your narrative, and my work reflected in the record. The mediator looked between us. What does that look like to you? He asked. It looks like equity, I said, or its value. And it looks like me having no further obligation to this family business. My mother stared at me like I was speaking betrayal instead of truth. This is about money, she said. No, I said evenly. This is about control. Silence. Melissa shifted in her chair. I didn't know, she said suddenly, about most of this. Andrew turned toward her sharply. This isn't. It is, she said, because I married into this. No one spoke after that. The mediator cleared his throat. I think we should take a break. In the hallway, Marissa handed me a bottle of water. You did well, she said. I feel strange, I admitted. Like I'm watching myself from a distance. That's what happens when you stop negotiating your worth in real time, she said. We returned to the room an hour later. The revised offer included equity conversion, cash payout, a formal acknowledgement of my operational role in company filings, a mutual non-disparagement clause. I read it slowly. What about the house? I asked. My father stiffened. What about it? He said. It was refinanced using company assets, I replied. Which I contributed to. The mediator nodded. That's a fair point. The room went very quiet. That was when I understood something fully, for the first time. They hadn't just excluded me from inheritance. They had built their security on my labor, then asked me to disappear so they wouldn't have to account for it. I want that addressed, I said. Andrew slammed his hand on the table. This is insane. I looked at him calmly. No, I said. This is overdue. The mediator suggested reconvening the following week. As we stood to leave, my mother reached for my arm. Please, she whispered. You're tearing this family apart. I gently removed her hand. You did that, I said. I'm just naming it. That night, I went home alone. I didn't feel victorious. I felt lighter. Because for the first time, the imbalance was no longer invisible. And once something is visible, It can't be unseen. The week between mediation sessions was the quietest my life had been in months. No calls, no emails, no carefully worded messages pretending to be conciliatory while testing my resolve. My parents' lawyer went silent. Andrew disappeared entirely. It was the kind of quiet that comes when people are recalculating. I used the time to do something I'd avoided for years. I went back through my own memories without trying to edit them. I remembered the summer I turned 21, when my father told me I couldn't take a paid internship out of state because the company needed me. Andrew was home that summer too. He worked 3 days a week. I worked 6. I remembered saying something once, late at night in the office, half joking, half hopeful. "Do I get a title for this?" My father hadn't looked up from his paperwork. Let's not complicate things. I had laughed back then, like it was a shared joke. It wasn't. Midweek, Marissa called. "They're asking for another informal conversation," she said. "With who?" I asked. "Just you and your father. No attorneys." I almost laughed. "No," I said. "Good," she replied. "I wanted to hear you say that." "What's the angle?" I asked. "They want to see if they can soften you emotionally," she said. "If you'll concede something to preserve the relationship." I looked out the window at the late afternoon light. There is no relationship to preserve, only habits. Thursday night, my father emailed again. Subject: "I'm asking as your father, Eleanor. I know things have gone too far. I want to understand where I failed you. Can we talk, without lawyers, without positions, just honestly?" I read it carefully. Not the words themselves, but the structure, the framing. He wasn't asking what he'd done. He was asking how I felt. That distinction mattered. I typed a reply and deleted it twice before sending. "We can talk after this is resolved, not before." His response came hours later. "I understand." I wasn't sure he did. But for the first time, he hadn't pushed. The second mediation session took place the following Monday. This time, the atmosphere was different. Less posturing, more fatigue. The mediator opened by summarizing progress. Then, Marissa spoke. "We've reviewed the revised offer," she said. "There are improvements, but the issue of asset commingling remains unresolved." My father cleared his throat. "We didn't realize the implications at the time." "That's not relevant," Marissa said evenly. "The question is how you intend to correct it." Andrew leaned forward. "You're trying to take the house now?" I met his gaze. "I'm trying to untangle myself from a system that used me without consent." "You lived there," he snapped. "You benefited." "I worked there," I replied. "You benefited." Silence. The mediator raised a hand. "Let's focus on solutions." The solution they proposed was partial. A lien on future profits. Deferred compensation. I shook my head. "I don't want to be tied to this business anymore," I said. "In any capacity." My mother's eyes filled again. "You're erasing us." "No," I said calmly. "I'm leaving." That landed differently. After a brief recess, their attorney returned with a new proposal. A clean separation. A cash settlement reflecting equity value plus adjusted compensation. A formal amendment to company records acknowledging my role retroactively. A written statement attached to filings clarifying my operational authority during specific years. And a restructuring of the house's debt so it was no longer tied to company assets. I read every page slowly. "And the non-disclosure?" I asked. "The same," the attorney said. "Mutual." I looked at Marissa. "This gives you what you asked for," she said quietly. "Power back. Distance. Closure." I exhaled. "Add one thing," I said. They all looked at me. "I want a clause stating I am under no obligation to attend family events or maintain contact as a condition of this agreement." My mother's breath hitched. "That's cruel," she said. "No," I replied. "That's honest." The mediator nodded. "That's reasonable." Andrew stared at the table. They agreed. The documents would be finalized within 10 days. As we stood to leave, Melissa approached me. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I really didn't know." "I believe you," I replied. She hesitated. "For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing." Andrew didn't look at either of us. That night, alone in my apartment, I felt something unexpected. Grief, not for the loss of money or connection, but for the version of myself that had believed endurance was love, that staying quiet was loyalty, that being useful was the same as being valued. I let myself feel it, just once, without dramatizing it, without turning it into a performance. The next morning, I got a notification from my bank. A pending transfer. Initial deposit. It wasn't the full amount, just a signal, a marker. This is real. I sat at my kitchen table and drank my coffee slowly. For the first time in my adult life, I wasn't waiting for permission, and that changed the way everything felt. The money didn't feel like victory. It felt like weight being removed from my chest, one careful layer at a time. The first transfer cleared on a Tuesday. I didn't celebrate. I didn't tell anyone. I logged into my account, confirmed the numbers, and closed my laptop. I had learned the hard way that visibility invites commentary, and I was done living under review. The paperwork arrived 3 days later in a thick envelope from Marissa's office. Final settlement, amendments, filings, language so precise it left no room for interpretation. I read every page, not because I didn't trust Marissa, but because I needed to see my reality translated into something permanent, something enforceable. When I reached the clause about no obligation of contact, I paused. It was there in black and white. Eleanor Brooks shall not be required to maintain personal or familial communication as a condition of this agreement, I signed. I didn't cry. I didn't hesitate. I felt steady. 2 weeks later, I drove back to my hometown one last time. Not for them, for me. The factory sat at the edge of town, like it always had. Brick building, faded sign. I parked across the street and watched the employees arrive for their shifts. People I'd worked alongside for years. People who had thanked me quietly when things ran smoothly and blamed management when they didn't. I didn't go inside. I had nothing left to prove there. At the house, my parents' house, I stayed in the car. The windows reflected the trees and sky so perfectly, I couldn't see inside. Good, I thought. Some things don't need a final look. On the drive back, my phone buzzed. Andrew. I didn't answer. A minute later, a text. I never wanted it to go this far. I read it once. Neither did I. I didn't send it. At work, I requested a week off. My manager didn't ask why. He just approved it and told me to rest. I spent that week doing small, grounding things. Sorting old files. Donating clothes I'd kept because someone else liked them. Cooking meals without rushing. Walking without headphones. On Friday, I met Marissa for lunch. You're officially free, she said, raising her glass. I don't feel dramatic enough about it, I said. She smiled. That's how you know it's real. Before we left, she handed me a final folder. One more thing, she said. Your father requested a copy of the signed agreement with your signature. Why? I asked. He said he wanted to frame it, she replied. I laughed. A single, short breath. No, I said. He can keep his copy. That evening, I sat on my couch and opened my laptop. For years, I'd kept my life compartmentalized. Work here, family there. Feelings, nowhere. I opened a blank document and typed a title. Things I will no longer do. I didn't make it poetic. I made it practical. I will not explain my boundaries to people committed to misunderstanding them. I will not trade silence for belonging. I will not confuse endurance with loyalty. I will not accept access without respect. I saved the file. The next morning, my mother emailed. Subject: We miss you. Just that. No apology, no accountability. I archived it. Not because I was angry, because I was done negotiating with the past. Later that week, Melissa sent a message. I hope you're okay. I hope someday things are different. I replied. I'm okay. Different is already happening. That night, alone in my apartment, I realized something subtle but important. The absence of chaos wasn't emptiness, it was space. And space is where new things grow. The first holiday after everything settled came quietly. Thanksgiving. No group texts, no seating charts, no performative gratitude passed around the table like a script everyone already knew by heart. I woke up that morning and realized I had nowhere I was expected to be. The thought was unsettling at first. Then it was relieving. I volunteered at a community kitchen on the west side of the city. Not because I needed to feel virtuous, but because I didn't want the day to become a vacuum. I wanted movement, noise, purpose without history attached to it. I chopped vegetables beside a woman named Carol, who told me, without prompting, that she'd cut ties with her sister 15 years ago over an inheritance dispute that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with control. People think these stories end with courtrooms, she said, handing me a tray of carrots. But they really end with silence. I nodded. She didn't need an explanation. That night, back home, I cooked for myself. Nothing elaborate: roasted chicken, potatoes, a glass of wine. I ate slowly, without distraction. Halfway through the meal, I noticed something strange. I wasn't bracing for anything. In previous years, even alone, my body had stayed alert, like something might still be demanded of me. A call, a comment, a reminder that I was late, or lacking, or wrong. This time, there was nothing. In December, the company finalized the restructuring tied to the settlement. It made a small local business section in the paper, just a paragraph. Brooks Industrial Supply announces internal reorganization following leadership review. My name appeared once, buried in the middle. Eleanor Brooks, former operations contributor. It wasn't glowing. It wasn't flattering. It was accurate. That mattered more than I expected. A week later, my father called from a blocked number. I let it go to voicemail. "Eleanor," his voice said, thinner than I remembered. "I won't keep trying if you don't want me to. I just wanted you to know. I see it now. I didn't before. I should have." I didn't delete the message. I didn't respond either. Clarity doesn't always require dialogue. Work shifted after the new year. My manager called me into his office and closed the door. "There's an opening coming up," he said. "Senior operations role. Bigger scope. More authority." I waited. "I put your name forward," he added. "You've been doing the work already." There it was again. The difference between being used and being recognized. "I'd like that," I said. The promotion came with a pay raise and a title that matched my responsibilities. I updated my LinkedIn profile and felt a flicker of something like pride, clean and unburdened. That night, Andrew emailed. Subject: Dad's health. He kept it short, vague, concerned but non-committal. "Dad's been under a lot of stress. Doctor says his blood pressure is high. Just thought you should know." I stared at the message for a long time. This was the old hook, the one designed to pull me back into a role defined by obligation instead of choice. I typed a reply carefully. "I'm sorry to hear that. I hope he follows his doctor's advice." Nothing more. Andrew didn't respond. As Christmas approached, the city filled with lights and noise. I attended a small gathering at Marissa's place. Her friends. No shared past. No expectations. Someone asked about my family. I said, "We're not close." And that was enough. On Christmas morning, I took a walk through the park. Snow dusted the paths. Couples passed with dogs and children. Life unfolding without my participation or permission. I thought about the years I'd spent measuring myself against an absence. A seat I was never fully offered. Approval that shifted just out of reach. I stopped walking and stood there for a moment, breath visible in the cold. The injustice hadn't been that they chose Andrew. It was that they never told me I was allowed to choose myself. That afternoon, I received a notification. Final transfer completed. The remainder of the settlement. Clean. Closed. I closed my banking app and sat back. This wasn't revenge in the way people like to imagine it. There was no explosion, no public downfall, no victory speech. There was just alignment. My work matched my worth. My silence matched my boundaries. My absence matched my choice. That night, before going to bed, I opened the document I'd titled, "Things I Will No Longer Do," and added one last line. "I will not return to places that required me to disappear in order to belong." I saved it and shut down my laptop. Outside, the city hummed. Ordinary. Unapologetic. So was I. The day I realized I had stopped waiting for an apology was unremarkable. No phone call, no letter, no dramatic moment of closure. Just a Tuesday morning in February when I poured my coffee, checked my calendar, and noticed that my parents' names no longer triggered any physical reaction in my body. That was new. For years, even the thought of them had come with a tightening in my chest, a subtle readiness to defend or explain. That morning, there was nothing. No tension, no anticipation. Just absence. At work, the transition into the senior role moved quickly. More meetings, more responsibility, clear authority. People deferred to me without questioning why. Not because I demanded it, but because it had been formalized. Titles matter. Not because they define worth, but because they remove ambiguity. And ambiguity is where people like my family had hidden for decades. One afternoon, while reviewing contracts, I caught myself smiling. Not because I was happy, because I was competent. There's a difference. A week later, I ran into someone I hadn't seen in years, Mrs. Caldwell. She'd lived 2 houses down from us growing up. She recognized me immediately in the grocery store. "Eleanor," she said, eyes widening. "I heard about the business changes." I nodded politely. "You always were the smart one," she said, lowering her voice. I never understood why they treated you like an extra. I didn't correct her. I didn't defend them. I simply said, neither did I. That night, my mother called from her own number for the first time since the settlement finalized. I let it ring. She didn't leave a voicemail. 2 days later, my father emailed. Subject: no expectations. "Eleanor, I don't know how to fix what I broke. I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know I'm thinking about you. That's all." I read it once. Then again. This was different. No request, no guilt. Still, I didn't reply. Not because I wanted to punish him, because responding would reopen something I had just finished closing. Late winter turned into early spring. The city softened. My life settled into a rhythm that didn't require vigilance. I started sleeping through the night. On a Friday evening in March, Andrew sent another message. "Melissa is pregnant." I stared at the screen. This was the kind of news that, in another life, would have carried obligation, expectations, a role pre-assigned. I typed slowly. "Congratulations." He replied almost immediately. "Mom wants to know if you'll come home for Easter." There it was. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I felt certainty. "I'm not coming," I wrote. "I wish you all well." The typing indicator appeared, disappeared, appeared again. "This doesn't have to be like this," Andrew wrote. I considered the sentence. "It already is." I didn't send that. Instead, I wrote, "I'm choosing differently." He didn't respond. A few weeks later, I met Carol, the woman from the Thanksgiving kitchen, for coffee. We'd stayed in touch casually. She listened as I talked, not interrupting. "You know what's funny?" she said when I finished. "People think boundaries are walls. They're not. They're doors with locks. You decide who gets a key." I nodded. In April, my company hosted a small off-site retreat. Nothing extravagant, just a day of planning and reflection. During a break, a colleague asked me how I'd learned to navigate conflict so calmly. I thought about it before answering. "By surviving it badly first," I said. She laughed, then stopped. "That's honest." That night, alone again, I pulled out the old photo album my mother had sent months earlier. I flipped through it one last time. The pictures weren't lies, but they weren't the whole truth either. I closed the album and placed it back on the shelf. Not hidden, not honored, just stored. That was the pattern now. I wasn't erasing my past. I was refusing to let it dictate my future. As spring settled in, invitations stopped arriving. Holidays passed without negotiation. News filtered through secondhand and grew quieter over time. The distance held. And in that space, something else began to form. A life that didn't require me to be smaller to fit. By the time summer arrived, the story had stopped belonging to anyone else. That realization came one afternoon when I was cleaning out a drawer and found an old keychain from the factory. Rusted, heavy, the kind you don't notice the weight of until you no longer have to carry it. I turned it over in my hand, then dropped it into a box labeled "Donate." Not everything needs a ceremony. Work had become demanding in a way that felt earned. I was overseeing 2 departments now, making decisions that had visible impact. People came to me with problems and left with answers. Not because I fixed everything, but because I listened without diminishing them. That was something I'd learned the hard way. In June, I was invited to speak on a small industry panel about operational resilience in family-adjacent businesses. I hesitated before accepting, not because I was afraid, because I didn't want my past to become my brand. In the end, I agreed, under one condition. I wouldn't be introduced by my family history. On stage, under soft lights, I spoke about structure, about clarity, about what happens when roles are implied instead of defined. When people don't know where they stand, I said, power fills the gap. Not always kindly. The audience nodded. Some of them took notes. Afterward, a woman approached me. Late 50s, calm presence. I recognize myself in what you said, she told me. I stayed quiet for 30 years. I thought I was being loyal. I met her eyes. So did I. That night, I didn't think about my parents at all. The call came 2 weeks later. It was Andrew. I almost didn't answer. Not out of fear, but because I'd learned to pause before stepping back into old dynamics. I answered. It's Dad, he said. No preamble. He had a minor stroke. The word landed, but it didn't knock me over. Is he stable? I asked. Yes. They caught it early. I waited. They want to know if you'll come, Andrew continued. Mom especially. There it was again. The pull. The assumption. I took a breath. I'm sorry this happened, I said. I hope he recovers fully. That's it? Andrew asked, frustration bleeding through. That's what I can offer, I replied. You're really done, he said. Yes, I said. I am. He was quiet for a moment. I don't understand how you can walk away, he said. I thought about that. Carefully. I didn't walk away, I said. I was pushed out, slowly. I just stopped pretending I was still inside. He hung up without saying goodbye. I sat with the phone in my hand for a while. This was the hardest part. Not the legal battle, not the money, not the exposure. The moment you accept that someone you love will never understand the version of events that set you free. A few days later, my father emailed from the hospital. Subject: I'm proud of you. Just that. I stared at the screen. Pride, offered too late, feels like a foreign currency. You recognize it, but you don't know what to do with it. I didn't respond. Not because it didn't matter, because it mattered differently now. Later that summer, I took a week off and traveled alone. Nothing dramatic. A small coastal town. Early mornings, long walks. Books I didn't rush through. One evening, sitting on a bench overlooking the water, I thought about the version of myself who would have felt guilty for this piece. She would have thought she was abandoning something sacred. I wished I could tell her this. You're not leaving love. You're leaving control that was disguised as love. On my last day, I received a notification. New voicemail. It was my mother. I don't know how to talk to you anymore, she said, voice thin. I hope someday you'll understand. We did our best. I listened to it once. Then I archived it. Understanding wasn't the same as returning. As summer waned, the noise around my family faded almost completely. No more messages. No more indirect updates. Just distance. And in that distance, I noticed something unexpected. I missed nothing. Not the tension, not the conditional warmth, not the version of myself that had survived by shrinking. The story had moved past confrontation. What remained was something quieter. Choice. The last document I signed related to my family arrived without drama. No cover letter, no apology attached. Just confirmation that everything had been executed as agreed. Accounts closed. Records amended. Obligations ended. I signed it on a quiet Sunday morning, sitting at my kitchen table with sunlight pooling across the wood. When I was done, I slid the paper back into the envelope and felt a finality settle that wasn't sharp or celebratory. It was clean. Later that day, I took a walk through my neighborhood. The same route I'd taken dozens of times before, but it felt different now. I wasn't rehearsing conversations in my head. I wasn't anticipating a call that might change my mood or derail my plans. I was just walking. That was the gift I hadn't known to ask for. People talk about revenge like it's loud, public, satisfying in a cinematic way. Someone loses, someone cries, tables turn. This wasn't that. What happened to me wasn't about humiliation or payback. It was about extraction. Removing myself from a system that thrived on my compliance and calling it love. I didn't win because my family lost something. I won because I stopped losing myself. Months passed. Seasons changed. My life continued without needing updates from the past to validate it. Work grew more challenging, in the best way. I mentored younger employees and made a point to name their contributions, out loud, in meetings, on paper. I never wanted someone to have to prove their worth by enduring silence the way I had. Once, a junior analyst asked me how to handle being overlooked by a senior colleague. I told her, Document everything. Not because you're paranoid, because clarity protects you. She nodded, like that mattered. It did. Around Thanksgiving, I received a card in the mail. No return address. Inside, a simple note in my father's handwriting. I hope you're well. I think about you often. I placed it in a drawer and closed it. That was enough. On Christmas morning, I didn't feel a hollow ache where family obligation used to sit. I felt present. I made coffee. I called a friend. I spent the day exactly how I wanted, without apology. That was the moment I understood the full shape of what I'd done. I hadn't chosen isolation. I'd chosen alignment. There's a difference. If you're listening to this and you recognize yourself anywhere in my story, I want you to hear this clearly. Love that requires you to stay silent isn't love. Belonging that demands self-erasure isn't belonging. And family that only works when you accept less will always ask for more. The moment I stopped trying to be included on their terms was the moment I became whole on my own. That was a real inheritance. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been excluded, overlooked, manipulated, or quietly pushed aside by people who insisted they loved you, I'd love to hear from you. Share your experience in the comments. These stories matter, and you're not the only one carrying them. And if you want more stories like this, about revenge that isn't loud, justice that isn't cruel, and choosing yourself without apology, consider liking this video and subscribing. Not for the algorithm, for the reminder that you're allowed to take your life back. I did, and I don't regret it for a second.